Okay, well, hello and welcome to your YIN class. Today we're going to be focusing on boosting the lymphatic system. So you won't need a whole lot of props. All I have today is a blanket and a block. And if you don't have a block, don't worry about it. We can use the blanket as well. But whenever you're ready, let's go ahead and just jump right in. So we're going to take the blanket and we're going to kind of create a U shape with it. So whenever you have that, go ahead and unfold the blanket and we're going to roll it up and create that U shape. So we're going to roll it up like a burrito, like a tightly rolled up little burrito there. And then once you have your blanket rolled up, you're just going to kind of fold it so you are creating that U-like shape. And go ahead and set that to the top of your space. So when we come to lay down onto our bellies, we're going to place the belly right on this bottom part of the U shape that we just created. Actually, I have mine upside down, sorry. Turn it so you've got the ends, so that way your hips can rest on the ends of the blanket and your belly can rest on this rolled up portion at the top. So I want to show you where we're going. Since we will be prone on the bellies, you won't be able to see. You want that top part of the U to be right under the bottom of your ribs, and then the downward portions of the U to be right there along the hips. So you may have to make a couple of adjustments as you come down. I'm just going to kind of move my microphone out of the way so I'm not laying on it. But when you come down, you just again want to make sure that top part of the U is right underneath of the ribs, and then the ends of the U shape are supporting the frontal hip bones. So what we're going to create here is just an exit for the lymphatic system by focusing on the breath. So if it feels okay, you can stay up on the forearms. If you prefer to come all the way down, if that feels more inviting, by all means, please feel free to come all the way down as well. But hopefully you've got a little bit of that blanket tactile feedback within the abdomen. And we're just going to breathe into that. So as you inhale, push the belly into the connection with it and the blanket. And as you exhale, just gently soften and let that go. As you inhale, push into the blanket. And as you exhale, just soften and let that go. And continue with your breath here. And the breath is such an important way to create this exit for the lymph back into the circulatory system. So we usually will start any lymphatic practice with that, with a diaphragmatic breath. And one such as what we're doing right now with that little bit of connection into a thicker roll of blanket gives the abdomen just a little bit more to push into, a little bit more feedback. We're just going to be here for a few minutes, so whatever you need to do to kind of just allow your awareness to focus on the breath. To feel that support in the body. And we'll just stay here for a few more rounds of breath. Also, just a nice way to make the transition from hectic life to being on the mat for that more introspective practice. Maybe take one more deep diaphragmatic breath here. Then whenever you like, let's go ahead and just gently press ourselves up and back to come off of this prop. And we're going to be seated for just a moment to kind of open up through the terminus. So if sitting feels a little uncomfortable on the low back, feel free to sit up against a wall. You can also kind of take this roll and just slide it underneath the sit bones. It just helps us sit up a little straighter. But we're going to really be targeting here in the terminus. So if you join me and we palpate, just take a couple fingertips and you find your collarbones or the clavicle. And we're going to be kind of in this triangle of space right above the collarbone and next to the neck. You kind of, if you palpate around there, you'll feel like a little hollow or a depression into the body, and just a gentle tapping. Doesn't have to be overly stimulating, just enough to kind of get that superficial layer beneath the skin. And this area, the terminus, it feeds into the subclavian vein, so it allows the lymph to return to the circulatory system. So again, this and the breath is kind of just priming the system, getting it ready to work as efficiently as possible. But throughout our practice today, we are going to find a little bit of acupressure for the main lymph nodes, as well as some really nice yin asanas to kind of find a little compression for those lymph nodes to just really encourage the system to function at its fullest. And whenever you're ready, just go ahead and let the arms fall. Maybe even close the eyes if your space feels safe to do so, and just take a couple of deep breaths. Simply just noticing how that feels. And then we're going to come to lay on our backs to bring a little acupressure into two main nodes, the axillary, so around the armpit, and then the inguinal nodes, which are around the groin area. So if you want to use your blanket roll to place under the neck or the back of the head like a pillow, that can be really nice. And if it feels okay on the body to lengthen the legs, I'm going to invite you to come into a completely supine position, like a traditional shavasana, if you will. Just to at first expand, especially the inguinal nodes there in the hip crease. So you can do both sides at the same time if you like. I prefer to do one side. So I'm going to take my right hand towards my left chest and towards the armpit region. And then the left arm, it can be really nice just to kind of cactus shape that and let it be kind of open. And make a fist with the right hand. And you're just going to tap all around this armpit, underneath the armpit, towards the arm and towards the chest. So really trying to cover as much territory as feels comfortable for you. And this is really nice just to get these axillary nodes awake and ready to receive lymph, or the fluid of the lymphatic system. And especially this is helpful for inflammation and waste clearance. So a week like we've had together with hard workouts can be really nice to help with that inflammation that the strength training creates. So good to do after a workout or a stressful day, or when you've been sick even, can be really helpful. Make sure you get underneath the armpit towards the sides of the body as well. Even in the armpit if it doesn't feel too sensitive, just like a vigorous kind of fist tapping motion here. And the breath is so important for everything, but especially with lymphatics. So as you're engaging in this acupressure, I invite you to still take those really deep diaphragmatic breaths as if you were still breathing into that U shape of the blanket. Once you feel like the left side is nice and woken up and online, let's just switch sides. So if finding that cactus shape through the right side. So you're just opening up the space around the armpit, making that fist through the left hand, and then again coming back to that tapping all around the right side. And if you did both sides at the same time, you might just let the arms relax here for a moment and just come back to that deep breath. Make sure to get underneath the armpit too, not just in front of. Take those nice deep breaths. And after you feel like that side is nice and awake, just let the arms relax down and let the chest open. We're going to move to the inguinal nodes. I don't know why I keep saying nodes. Which are towards the groin. So if you're familiar with anatomy and you know the femoral triangle, we're going to be kind of right in that femoral triangle. But if that doesn't make any sense to you, that's okay. We're just going to, again, make two fists. This time we will do both sides together. And just think right kind of in line with the pubic bone in the groin area, but at the most inner part of the inner thigh. So right there, kind of in like this soft spot where the inner thighs and the pubic bone kind of meet. We're going to just be basically in that region. And again, you can cover more territory. It's not going to do any harm if you get off of the specifics. But we want to just make sure we kind of wake up this entire lymph region, which is a huge hub for the lymphatic system, just like it was when we were doing the axillary nodes up near the armpits. I'm just trying to make sure we bring all of this online and prepare the nodes to do their job. And once you get familiar with kind of the tapping sensation, come back to those nice deep breaths. This is a great one too if you don't have time to do the whole body. If this is a great one to spark after like a leg day for workouts, or if you've been sitting all day at work, to help the lymphatics of the lower bodies to release, to gather up all that waste and to come back to the inguinal nodes. And then let that go, let your arms relax, and take a moment just to feel the vibrations you've created within the body, to come back to those deep breaths. And the nice thing about approaching this with a therapeutic mind is there's no rush. We're just letting the body do what it's meant to do and what it's intelligently meant to do, and just supporting it with some extra work here. Whenever you're ready, we're going to come up to have a seat again as we start to transition into our more yin-shaped asanas. So for this one, go ahead and if you like, I like for a seated fold, which is what we're coming into, a seated forward fold, is to have my tips of my bottom of my sits bones up on a blanket, which just helps you to sit a little bit more comfortably upright. From there, extend your legs straight. You can have them as close together as feels good for you, or wider than hips distance, whatever feels really nice. And then as you come into your fold, a couple of ways we can do this is having your arms out like kickstands and keeping the spine a little bit more long or erect. Or if it feels nice, you can round the spine and kind of just hang out over the legs. Whatever feels more okay on the spine, but what we're looking for here is that gentle compression through the front of the hips, the inguinal nodes that we just released with that gentle tapping. So you do want to find that hinging from the hips and that kind of sandwiching of the upper body and the lower body in any way that feels okay for you. Once you've found your forward fold, let the feet soften, let the head and the neck soften, and allow yourself to feel supported either with the rounded spine or the longer just more straight spine. And just like we did previously, we're just going to come right back into those nice deep diaphragmatic breaths. As you settle in, bring that awareness back to breathing deeply through the belly. Imagine the belly like a pump supporting the lymphatics. So the breath is really important to this system, as well as to what we try to do in yin, supporting the body, but also finding a little bit more relaxation through the nervous system. The breath is very powerful. I'll be here for about another minute. So notice if there's any areas that are tensing up and see if you can't allow them to soften or to surrender. And then slowly start to walk yourself back up. Walk the hands back behind you so you're coming out of that compression. You may want to kind of scooch off your blanket if you were sitting on it and just gently kind of shake the legs out. And since we just invited in compression through the front of the hips, we're now going to invite them to open or stretch. So keep your blanket roll, and we're going to flip it over and come into a more prone position. And if your roll came undone a little bit like mine, feel free to fix that. We're going to come into Sphinx pose. So on the forearms, I'm going to invite you though to place the forearms on the blanket. So it'll be a little bit more of a lifted Sphinx than what we might be used to. And if that doesn't feel okay on the low back, feel free at any time to just make this more traditional. But allow the hips to come to the floor. The elbows will kind of be underneath the shoulders, so they're supporting the upper body and the head. And then again, I have my elbows on the blanket, so it's just kind of creating more space through the front body. But now we're allowing the frontal hips and specifically the inguinal nodes to open up after that compression shape. The head can be however feels comfortable. If it feels okay on the vertebra of the neck to keep the gaze forward and be in a little bit of spinal extension, that can be really nice and helpful. But if that feels like a lot and you feel like the back of your neck is getting compressed a little bit too much, feel free to just slightly tuck the chin to the chest and come into a more neutral position for the neck. But again, once you have all of that, I invite you to come back to your deep diaphragmatic breath. Might even have a little bit of contact with the belly to the floor that you can breathe into. here for about 3 more deep breaths. And after your third breath, just go ahead and walk the arms out underneath of you and come down. Your chest might land on the blanket if that's uncomfortable. Feel free to move it, but just stack the forearms and lay face down on the belly in this prone position. Just to kind of release through the low back. And we're going to come into a really nice stretch for the pecs or the chest area, connecting into the axillary nerve. So we're going to stay on the floor, and we're imagine, in fact, you can stay where you are. I just want to show you. Stay face down though. We will bring the arm into a cactus shape and then lay somewhat on the side or the front of the body. It'll kind of be at an angle. If your blanket is still to the top of your mat, go ahead and take it out from underneath of you if it's still there, and we can use that as a pillow, which can be really nice. I will actually do my right arm first so you can kind of see where the arm will go. But we're going to take the arm out like a 90 degree, like a cactus shape. Once it's there, so the upper arm will probably not touch the floor. It might not even be anywhere close to the floor, but see if you can't keep the forearm on the floor. Start to roll onto your side, pull your bottom knee out from underneath of you, and if that blanket rolls there, that can be nice to kind of just slide underneath the temple or the side of the head like a little pillow. But what we want to find here is a little bit of stretch through the front of the chest. So whatever arm is behind you in this cactus shape, so for me that's my right arm, finding a stretch right there in the front of the armpit region and maybe even in towards the armpit as well. Finding this nice release throughout the pecs. And as much as you can, try to soften. If something doesn't feel quite right, if you feel like you're pulling through the low back or the hips, please make any adjustments that will allow you to be comfortable. Not straining or striving for anything, but simply allowing the props we're using, the floor and the blanket, to just kind of hold us in this shape. And then when you can, just come back to that nice deep diaphragmatic breath. About 3 more deep breaths here. And then to come out of it, slowly just roll onto the belly and just transition to the other side. So bringing that left arm into that cactus-like shape, and then slowly kind of working that bottom leg out underneath of you so you can be somewhat laying on the side body versus just laying on the belly, but just enough so you can start to feel that stretch through the chest on the left side. Again, feel free to use the blanket like a pillow to support the head. And try not to actively push the left forearm into the floor, just let it kind of be more of a passive stretch. Deep breaths here. And then whenever you're ready, just start to come up into a seated position. And we're going to come into a seated twist and invite a little bit of movement through the shoulders. So however you'd like to get there, I'm going to bring my right foot over my left knee. But if that doesn't feel comfortable, you can always extend the bottom leg as well. And if the hips feel like they're lifted from the floor, feel free to slide a blanket underneath. From the twist, if you're following me where your right leg is on top, take the right hand behind you and kind of walk your fingers back. Once the right hand is back behind you, we're going to take the head, bring your chin towards your left shoulder. So you're looking away from the fingers. And then we're just going to circle this right shoulder. So I'll kind of move to the side too so you can see. But it doesn't have to be overly big, but again, just kind of inviting in this movement through this area filled with nodes in the armpit region and all around the shoulder and the neck. Not worrying about how big the movement is, just inviting in just this gentle movement throughout the shoulder on the right side. And slowly settle back into stillness. And bring the head back through center, come out of the twist, and let's just switch sides when you're ready. So now the left leg will be on top, bringing the left hand back behind you, walking the fingertips a little bit further away from the body. Bringing the chin over to the right shoulder, so again away from the side that we're twisting to, and then just circling that left shoulder. Slowly settle back into stillness. Bring your head back up through center and come out of the twist. And take a moment just to massage a little bit around the face. So if you kind of take your hands, mine don't do it, but if you make little Star Trek fingers, we're going to take that around the ears, and we're just going to gently massage up and down. So we've got 2 fingers on either side of the ear and just gently rubbing. We've got little nodes all in through this area, so just again creating this sense of release. And because a lot of the vessels of the lymphatic system are just right there beneath the skin layer, when we get to these areas such as we are right now, we don't need a whole lot of pressure. In fact, often less is more. So just kind of pulling or dragging the skin down towards the neck, just encouraging the lymphatics to drain away from the head and back down towards the subclavian vein and into the circulatory system. After a couple rounds of that, we're just going to do a little skin flicking or skin brushing. If you have a skin brush, that can be nice. We'll start at the nose, and it's just these, again, just the superficial skin layer, this slight little flicking from the nose out towards the ears, right across the cheeks. And we want to do the majority of the face. So maybe as you work your way out and you come back in towards the nose, moving the fingers down just a little bit. So eventually we're down towards the chin. And again, brushing in that way of pulling away and down towards the lymph drainage. And after you feel like you've covered a decent amount of the face, go ahead and come back. Let the arms relax down in towards your lap, and just take a deep breath. And we're going to do just a little bit more through the hips for compression. So you'll need that blanket roll again. We're actually going to place the blanket in front of the hip crease as we come into a low lunge. So I'm going to start on the right side. Getting into this is probably the hardest part of this asana. So I'm going to invite you to kind of extend through the hips so you can create space. You might have to unroll the blanket a couple of times if you rolled the whole thing up. The physical roll might just be a little too big. And then place it as close to your frontal hip bone and into that hip crease as you can. Hold it in place just as you start to come into your low lunge. And then you can just let the hands rest on the floor or on blocks, as we'll be here for just about a minute, so we won't be here for too long. But again, still just breathing into this sensation. Just breathing into the compression being created with the hip and the blanket roll. Slowly back off. We're going to keep the blanket roll right in the hip, but we're going to come into pigeon next. So walk your right foot over to the left side of your mat and then kind of lower that knee down. As you lower the knee, you might have lost the blanket, so you might have to again kind of wedge that blanket up into the hip crease. Then again, you can come onto the hands if that feels okay, or maybe even onto the forearms, whatever feels okay and comfortable in your body. But again, finding that compression through the front of the hip with the blanket. And we'll only be here for about a minute, so it won't be too long. So So once you settle in, come right into stillness and come right back to your breath. And then slowly start to release yourself as you come back up. And we're just going to come right into the other side. So stepping the left foot forward, grabbing that blanket roll. Lean back a little bit just so you can, again, kind of wedge that blanket up into the hip crease. And then sink into the hips, bringing hands either to the floor or to your blocks as you come into this compression low lunge. Once you settle in as quickly as we can, coming into that stillness and right back to that diaphragmatic breath. Let the hips sink even more. And take 2 more deep breaths here. And then let's set up for pigeon. So back out of your lunge a little bit and a ball heel step your left foot to the right long edge of your mat. Support yourself as that left knee drops down. If you lost the blanket, feel free to readjust, kind of snug it up into that hip. Feel free to stay up on the hands if that feels more inviting, or come down onto the forearms. Once you feel comfortable, settling right back into that stillness and coming right back into that diaphragmatic breath. And then this time, feel free just to kind of, as you come up, sit on to that left hip. You can remove your blanket and sweep that right leg around. And if that transition doesn't work for you, feel free to come out of that however it does. You can keep your blanket if you would prefer to come into waterfall or imitation legs up a wall or supported bridge with a blanket. I'm going to use a block. So just like we did earlier in our practice where we found compression through the hips and then we invited openness, we're going to do the same thing here. So taking the block, go ahead and lay all the way down. You can have your block either on the lowest or the mid setting. I would avoid the highest though, it just doesn't feel very stable. And pressing through the feet, start to pick the hips up. So you can slide the block right underneath the hips and the tailbone. And we're just going to stay here kind of in this supported bridge for a couple of breaths. And eventually work our way into a supported inversion with the legs up towards the ceiling. We're just kind of heavy through the pelvis, heavy through the sacrum, so everything's kind of melting or cascading down towards the floor. And just inviting in this more openness through the front of the hips after we had held that compression with the blanket for our last 2 shapes. And then whenever you're ready, bring your knees into your chest And allow the legs to extend up towards the sky for an inversion. Allowing the lymph to physically just drain out of the extremities and towards the nodes there at the hips. And again, come right back into that deep diaphragmatic breath. And then slowly just allow the knees to rebend. And then bring the knees slightly in more towards the chest so you can reach the hands behind the knees. The knees tend to be a pretty decent bottleneck for the lymph. So I invite you just to gently massage behind the kneecaps. Just again to encourage that lymph to release, to move through the system and back towards the nodes for that cleanup. Especially after a hard week of workouts to really help with that inflammation. And try to massage the sides of the knees and all around the front kneecap as well. And it doesn't have to be much, but just enough to kind of support the system and help the lymph to work its way through. Once you feel like it's pretty good, release and bring the feet back to the floor. Lifting the hips to remove whatever prop you had underneath of you. Then I invite you again to come into that completely supine position and make two fists, and we're just gonna tap right along the SC joint, so where the sternum and the clavicle come together. Again, just to helps create that exit after we've helped the lymph move through the body to get it back into the circulatory system. And we'll just be here for about 30 seconds, just enough to kind of create that exit and support the system. And don't forget to breathe deeply. And then release, let your arms come down by your sides. And settle into your Shavasana. And this is where I'm going to leave you today for your practice. I invite you to stay in your Shavasana with your diaphragmatic breath for as long as you have time. I want to thank you for sharing your practice time with me. And until next time, be well.